arresting officer, nandiyan na. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all rise for the arrival of the Honorable Senate President and the Honorable Senators of the Republic of the Philippines.
The 24th session of the Senate and the third regular session of the 17th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Bamakino will lead us in prayer.
Let's put ourselves in the presence of our Lord. Lord, we ask for your guidance today as many occurrences are happening in our own halls. We pray, Lord, for our colleague, Senator Sonny Trillanes, as he goes through many trials today. We pray for our country. We pray for the leaders here that we may always put the people ahead of ourselves and ahead of everything. We pray, Lord, that you will always guide us, you will always be with us, you will always wrap us in your love, and that we may always, always do everything for your greater glory. Amen.
Amen. The Secretary will please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Onasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Legarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Zubiri, Senate President Soto III.
With 15 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. The Majority Leader?
Thank you, Mr.
We'd
President.
like to entertain a motion to suspend the session.
I move to suspend session, Mr. President.
Session is suspended. Session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Take it up with him. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal on the 23rd session, Monday, September 4, 2018, and consider the same as approved. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
The Secretary will proceed with the reference of business.
Reference of business. Message of the President of the Philippines. Letter of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte dated 21 September 2018 certifying to the necessity of the immediate enactment of Senate Bill number 1826 entitled An Act Strengthening Workers' Right to Security of Tenure, amending for the purpose Articles 106, 107, 108, and 109 of Book 3 and Articles 294, 295, 296, and 297 of Book 6 of Presidential Decree Number 442, otherwise known as the Labor Code of the Philippines as amended, in order to strengthen workers' security of tenure by prohibiting the prevalent practices of contractualization and labor-only contracting, which continue to immerse our workers in a quagmire of poverty and underemployment.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
Bills on first reading, Senate number 2026 entitled An Act Lowering the Minimum Age of Criminal Responsibility, amending for the purpose Section 6, 20, 20-A, 20-B, and 22 of Republic Act number 9344 as amended, otherwise known as the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act of 2006, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Soto III.
To the Committee on Justice, Women, and Finance.
Senate number 2027 entitled An Act Amending Article 1898 of Republic Act number 386, otherwise known as the New Civil Code of the Philippines, introduced by Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay.
To the Committee on Trade.
Senate number 2028 entitled An Act to Improve Access to Preschool, Primary, and Secondary Education of Homeless Children and Youth, introduced by Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay.
To the Committee on Education, Women, and Finance.
Senate number 2029 entitled An Act Establishing a Comprehensive Training Program for Teachers of Children with Handicaps, introduced by Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy S. Binay.
To the Committees on Education and Finance.
Resolutions. PS Resolution number 903 entitled Resolution Directing the Senate Committee on Sports to evaluate the preparedness of the country's national athletes and sports training facilities in anticipation of the upcoming 2019 Southeast Asian SEA Games, introduced by Senator Sonny Angara.
Referred to the Committee on Sports.
PS Resolution number 904 entitled Resolution Directing the Senate Committee on Public Services and Science and Technology to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the alleged robocall modus, which has been recently reported, featured on social media and mainstream news outlets, on the actions taken by the relevant authorities and on the implications of these types of scams on our telecommunications industry as regulated under Republic Act number 7925 of the Public Telecommunications Policy Act of the Philippines, introduced by Senator Grace Poe.
Referred to the Committees on Public Services and Science and Technology. We have additional reference of business.
Additional reference of business, messages from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 21 September 2018, it designated Representatives Yap, Vargas, Amante, Olivares, Velasco, Nunez, Malañaon, Aumentado, Nieto, Lacson, Lopez, and Matugas II as conferees to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of House Number 7652 entitled An Act Requiring Public Telecommunications Entities to Provide Nationwide Mobile Number Portability to Subscribers, and Senate Number 1636 entitled An Act Requiring Public Telecommunications Entities to Provide Nationwide Mobile Number Portability to Subscribers.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
Letters from the Speaker of the House of Representatives dated September 13, 17, 19, and 21, 2018 respectively, pursuant to Section 53 of Republic Act No. 8749, otherwise known as the Philippine Clean Air Act of 1999, which created a Joint Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairman, Representative Roy M. Loyola; Members, Representative Daquila Carlo E. Cua; Representative Lawrence Lemuel H. Fortun; Representative Federico S. Sandoval II; Representative Manuel Antonio F. Zubiri. Pursuant to Section 33 of Republic Act No. 9275, otherwise known as the Philippine Clean Water Act of 2004, which created a Joint Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Ex officio Chairman, Representative Daquila Carlo E. Cua; Members, Representative Marlene B. Alonte; Representative Raul V. Del Mar; Representative Lorna C. Silverio; Representative Victor A. Yap. Pursuant to Section 24 of Republic Act No. 10022, an act amending Republic Act No. 8042, otherwise known as the Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipinos Act of 1991, which created a Joint Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Ex officio Chairman, Representative Jesulito A. Manalo; Members, Representative Arnel M. Serafica; Representative Henry S. Suaminal; Representative Joey S. Salceda; Representative Eileen C. Radaza. Pursuant to Section 33 of Republic Act No. 8800, otherwise known as the Safeguard Measures Act, which created a Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Representative Ferginel Giberon; Representative Estrelita Biswan Singh; Representative Jose T. Panganiban Jr. Pursuant to Section 62 Republic Act No. 9136, otherwise known as the Electric Power Industry Reform Act of 2001, which created a Joint Congressional Power Commission, the provisions of Joint Resolution No. 1 of the 15th Congress, extending the period of existence of the Joint Congressional Power Commission for another period of 10 years from June 26, 2011, designating the following: Representative Lord Alan J.Q. Velasco; Representative Rodel M. Batucabe; Representative Arnulfo P. Fuentebella; Representative Jose Enrique S. Garcia III; Representative Jericho Jonas B. Nograles; Representative Carlos Roman L. Uybazeta; Representative Danilo E. Suarez. Pursuant to Section 19 of Republic Act No. 9160, otherwise known as the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2001, which created the Congressional Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairman, Representative Arthur C. Yap; Members, Representative Henry C. Ong; Representative Mark Ogo; Representative Florida P. Robes; Representative Alfred Vargas; Representative Milagros Aquino Magsaysay; Representative Danilo E. Suarez. Pursuant to Section 33 of Republic Act No. 9369, an act amending Republic Act No. 8436 entitled An Act Authorizing the Commission on Elections to use an automated election system in the May 11, 1998 national or local elections and in subsequent national and local electoral exercises, which created a Joint Oversight Committee designating the following: Chairperson, Representative Delphine G. Lee; Members, Representative Sherwin N. Tugna; Representative Luisa Lloren Cuaresma; Representative Edgar R. Erice; Representative Jennifer A. Barzaga; Representative Danilo E. Suarez; Representative Francisco G. Datol Jr.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
Resolution. PS Resolution Number 905, entitled Resolution Recognizing the Efforts of the President of the Republic of Korea, Moon Jae-in, in the efforts to bring reconciliation and development not only in the Korean Peninsula but also in the Philippines, introduced by Senator Richard J. Gordon.
Referred to the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, just an administrative matter. I move to transfer Senate Bill number 1602, granting Philippine citizenship to Kuo King Carlos Yung, which was referred to the Committee on Rules on November 20, 2017, to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, may I ask for a 1-minute suspension for the Minority Floor Leader who's going to interpolate?
Before the suspension, I can see the presence of a congressman from Cebu.
Oh, yes. We have with us the presence of
Congressman,
Congressman Salimbangon.
Yes, Benhar Salimbangon
Benhar Salimbangon.
is welcome to the Senate.
So we'll just ask
The
for a-
Minority Leader is in the back of the hall.
I know, Mr. President. Pwede na tayo? Therefore, I move that we resume consideration, Mr. President, on Senate Bill number 1850. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
This is an act institutionalizing the National Integrated Cancer Control Program of Senator J.V. Ejercito. The status, Mr. President, is that we are in the period of interpellation. May we recognize the honorable gentleman From San Juan, Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito, and to interpellate our distinguished minority floor leader. So move, Mr. President.
Senator J.B. Ejercito is recognized to sponsor the measure. The minority leader, Senator Frank Drilon, is recognized to interpellate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman sponsor yield to a few questions on Senate Bill 1850?
Yes, willingly, from the distinguished minority leader.
First of all, let me spread into the record that we have no objection to the passage of this Senate Bill 1850. We recognize the need to focus attention on cancer control program. Indeed, it is it's a major source of concern. And on a personal basis, as the gentleman sponsor may know, my first wife died of cancer, and therefore topics like this would always elicit memories that compels me, that encourages me to support programs of this nature. Having said that, we will endorse the approval of this bill, I just have a few clarificatory questions. May we ask the sponsor to turn to page 14, line 6. On page 14, line 6, we have the establishment of a career assistance fund. First question is, how is this career assistance fund to be funded, from the General Appropriations Act or elsewhere?
Mr. President,
Cancer Assistance Fund, I'm sorry.
the Cancer Assistance Fund will be funded, just like the mental health law, from the GA, and likewise from donations, Mr. President, because, as you know, there are a lot of foundations right now, especially for cancer control, for cancer that are willing to take part in the program, Mr. President.
So is this, and just for the record, this will be funded, or the Cancer Assistance Fund will be funded out of the General Appropriations Act?
Yes, Mr. President, and to be augmented by donations from the different foundations.
Okay. So these are public funds. The Cancer Assistance Fund is in the nature of a public fund.
Yes, Mr. President.
What is the model that from where we based the establishment of a Cancer Assistance Fund? Is there anything in the existing structure that establishes a similar assistance fund?
Well, just like any other medical assistance fund from the DOH, and it will...
Sorry, sir?
Just like other medical assistance fund from the Department of Health. But this particular fund, we will be getting it from the ongoing cancer prevention and control program, which is an ongoing program of the cancer control prevention.
But they can also receive donations?
Yes, Mr. President, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of foundations right now that are connected with cancer. So we will, in this bill particularly, we are open to accepting some donations from these foundations.
Would the gentleman walk us through the process here, especially in terms of the ability of the Department of Health to manage the fund? First of all, since there is no corpus that is being of funds that is being established from which only the interest can be used. In other words, if there is 100 million in the fund established through the General Appropriations Act, the DOH can disburse of those 100 million?
Yes, Mr. President, they will be, we will give them the authority, since they have the technical expertise as well. So they will have the authority to disburse the said cancer control fund for the specific purpose.
We have no objection to this. We're just trying to understand it, Mr. President. Now, assuming there is 100 million in the Cancer Assistance Fund, 75 million of which comes from the General Appropriations Act, and 25 million from the donations. Can the first the donations becomes part of the public fund? Excuse me for asking these questions. I'm not objecting. I'm just trying to understand.
Yes, Mr. President, in a way, but if they would, it will be better if they can donate, for example, directly to the, like equipment or anything that that is tangible for the cancer control institutions or the centers. That will be easier because if it, I understand your concern that if it is fund, it will be very difficult to distinguish public funds and.
Yeah, because if it's a fund, if it's a public fund, which and therefore you need authority from Congress to spend it. Tell me if I'm wrong. In the example I gave, we gave, Mr. President, the cancer assistance fund is 100 million. Out of that 100 million, let's say 75 million came from the General Appropriations Act, and 25 million came from private sector donation. First question, does the donation, which is done by the private sector, does it become part of the public fund or become part of the national treasury? If the answer is yes, then do we need an appropriation from Congress, or is there an authority to spend these funds privately donated to the government? I'm just trying to understand how this will work, sir.
Well, that will be any input from the minority leader will be very much welcome, no? Because I myself it will be very hard to treat, no? If it's a donation, you are correct that if it's public fund, you would need appropriation. But if it's I really don't know how, if it's direct on how we can treat it. But of course, if it will be for the cancer center, or it will be hard to refuse as well.
That is why I'm asking if there is a model that we have followed, and how do we treat the funds in that model. There might be some fund existing somewhere, which is both public and private, and how is it being disbursed. As I said, I have no objection to this. I'm just trying to ask this question to understand, so that if the good sponsor can just make of record how this will be processed, we can leave it at that, at least for the guidance of the implementers. This is how it will go, because you have stated here that the donation shall be exempt from income or donor's tax and all other taxes, fees, and charges imposed by the government. Now, this is an exemption, and the obvious question is, would this have to be approved by the absolute majority of both houses of Congress, since this is an exemption from the payment of taxes? So these are the questions that I would like the sponsor to spread into the record, just so the implementers can be guided on this. As he said, I would repeat, I have no objections to this bill.
Yes, Mr. President, the distinguished minority leader, we'll take note of your concern, and we'll make sure that we'll address those, no? Especially when we come up already with the final draft of the bill.
Maybe if we can request the sponsor that in the next time that this is called, he spreads into the record what is understood by Section 20, responding to the concerns that we raised. I will repeat, this is not an objection. I just want the record to be clear as to what the intention of this chamber is, Mr. President. So I would appreciate if in the next time that this case, or that this bill is called for consideration, we are expecting the good sponsor to spread into the record what is meant by Section 20 on page 14 of Senate Bill 1850. We can leave it at that at this point, and we'll just await for the next next time that this is brought on the floor. Now, the second issue is,
Yes, Mr. President, before we go to the second issue, be rest assured that I will take note of that, and they will include a mechanism, no, for the utilization of the said
Good.
donation for the cancer fund.
okay, very good. The next issue, the last issue I would like to raise is on Section 31, which penalizes certain acts. First, I will repeat, I have no objection to this, but I would like to have a clear understanding of this, of what it means, and please spread it into the record. The Section 31 states, and let me read it for the record, it shall be unlawful for any person, natural or juridical, to make any false or misleading claims through advertisement in any media outlet about any drug, device, agent, or procedure purporting to be a cure or a prophylactic against cancer. It shall also be unlawful to advertise any drug, device, agent, or procedure related to cancer without prior approval or authority from the appropriate regulatory bodies. First question. The first sentence assumes that there is no cure for cancer, and therefore it is unlawful for anyone through advertisement to present any device, agent, drug, or procedure purporting to be the cure against cancer. Is that correct? Huh? So that anyone who says there is a cure is subject to penalty?
Well, there is cancer. It's a very complex disease, no? So I don't know if there's really a cure right now, but
Yeah, that's
prevention.
correct. Yes, we do not know if there is really a cure right now. But the way this is phrased, it is unlawful to claim that that there is a cure. Just the mere claim, just the mere advertisement that this is a cure is already unlawful. Is that what it purports to be, Mr. President?
Mr. President, the reason for this is that there are a lot of products right now, medicines, other supplements that claim that they can cure cancer. No, there are a lot of those. So that we would like to make sure that any drugs which claims that they can cure any disease should be registered and have approval with the Food and Drugs Authority.
No, sir. The first sentence says that to make a false or misleading claims through advertisement about any device purporting to be a cure or prophylactic against cancer. Meaning, if, for example, somebody claims that a stem cell procedure is a cure on cancer, that is unlawful.
Yes, yes, that is correct. I think stem cell will be should be classified as a prevention or strengthen. I don't think it can really cure
Well,
cancer.
these are all scientific conclusions. We do not know whether it is a cure. I'm no expert on this. We are just saying that reading your bill, the bill, it is punishable by imprisonment. If you claim that any procedure or any drug or any device or agent is a cure against cancer. I'm not saying that this is not correct. I'm just trying to figure out that this is what you meant. That if somebody says, take a stem cell procedure and your cancer will be cured. Because it brings also to mind, Mr. President, we see in the newspapers claims from, I think, certain clinic in China claiming that it is a cure for cancer. That means it is punishable under Section 31 if it becomes law? I'm not saying it should not be. I'm just testing the validity of the statement here.
Mr. President, according to our resource person here from the cancer control that 1/3 of the cancer diseases can be cured, no, according to if
What?
treated early. If treated early.
Yes, but nevertheless, there is a cure.
Yes, Mr. President, if treated
So
early.
if you claim that, if you say, if your cancer is stage 1, it can be cured, that under Section 31, you can be punished with imprisonment because you are claiming that this is a cure. And now you just make a statement, Mr. President, the sponsor of goods makes a statement that it can be cured. So something, this Section 31 is all encompassing that you can be imprisoned. When in fact, if it can be cured, then you should incur no liability. We just want to be clarified, Mr. President.
Mr. President, according to our cancer expert here, that this is for those that claim, but that does not pass the rigorous testing or medical or scientific testing, Mr. President.
No, there is no such qualification in the way the bill is crafted. And in fact, I'll concentrate on that first because I have also questions on the second sentence of Section 31. But let us be very clear because this is a provision which declares an act to be illegal, unlawful, and subjects the one who makes such claim to imprisonment of not less than 6 months.
Yes, Mr. President, if the minority leader would give suggestions, we are open out on how we can improve and how we can word it in such a way that it will mean that this particular provision will be clearer. So we'll be open for.
Mr. President, if the good sponsor is in conformity with our view that there is something to be clarified, I would like to see how the committee will amend this at the appropriate time, and we will look at it if it is indeed consistent with the answers given by the good sponsor at this period of interpellation. We will await if indeed through these questions the sponsor would realize that Section 31 can stand improvement since he is the sponsor and he has the group of experts behind him. We would rather that the proposed amendment be submitted as a committee amendment on the floor and for our colleagues to review the same. If that is in order, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President, gladly, and we will gladly accept any amendment and any suggestion from the minority leader to further improve this provision.
Mr. President, I will not make the amendment. I would propose that the committee makes the
Yes, we will
amendment.
we will propose the proper amendment at the proper time, Mr.
Yes,
President.
Mr. President. Now, the second sentence of Section 31 says, it shall also be unlawful to advertise any drug, device, agent, or procedure related to cancer without prior approval or authority from the appropriate regulatory bodies. Who is the regulatory body?
Mr. President, it's the FDA
Okay.
and DOH, Mr. President, but it's really, usually it's the FDA.
Is the FDA today known for its competence in certifying the efficacy of any drug? There's a lot of news, there's a lot of talk about the ability of the FDA to do this. Is the FDA exempt from pressures and lobbies from established drug companies? For example, alternative medicine if an alternative medicine is advertised and say it is accepted in other jurisdictions, would the publication of alternative medicine say which is allowed in the United States of America but not yet allowed here? Would that be would that make the proponent liable or the advertiser liable, even if it is already approved by the FDA in other jurisdictions and not the FDA here?
Mr. President, according to our expert, that the the alternative medicine can be supplementary, but they cannot take place of the mainstay or the standard medicine, Mr. President. That's according to our expert. The alternative medicine can only be a supplementary.
Now, I'm just citing that as an example. But the main point is, all right, if it is already an approved procedure on an approved drug, say by the United States Food, FDA, or whatever it is called, at hindi po inaaprubahan dito for whatever reasons, bawal po ba na i-advertise yung ganong klaseng gamot? Kasi I see instances when the advertisers claim approved by the US FDA. Yun po ba'y bawal? Yun po ba'y makukulong ang advertiser?
Mr. President, even if a drug is approved in the US, when it comes to the Philippines, according to the expert, they still have to undergo testing in trials. No?
Okay. Yes. So,
So not necessarily that it's not automatic that if it's approved in the US that we will.
Yes. Because the FDA also approves lipstick. The FDA also approves notebooks that allegedly contain lead or pencil or whatever. So, you know, that is why that appropriate authority or appropriate regulatory bodies is something that may raise questions. Moreover, is the FDA the sole authority?
Yes, Mr. President.
No other body?
Not for drugs, Mr. President.
Not for drugs. Wow. Acupuncture. If it is claimed that acupuncture can prevent or can cure cancer at very early stage, assuming that there is one. Acupuncture is, I do not know if it is approved by the FDA, but assuming it is not, is that unlawful? Would it subject the advertiser to imprisonment?
Mr. President, according to our expert here also, the acupuncture has no proven effect yet, no? It may supplement, again, also just like any other alternative medicine, but as far as the mainstay treatment, according to them, they cannot, it's not yet accepted.
What about stem cell procedure?
Mr. President, stem cell for bone marrow for the treatment of leukemia is acceptable.
Stem cell for treatment of leukemia is acceptable.
Bone marrow treatment, Mr.
Now,
President.
but
Bone marrow transplant. I mean.
so it is a cure. Stem cell procedure is a cure for leukemia, which is a form of cancer.
Yes, Mr. President, it can be, but it's not the first line treatment. But according to our expert, again, it can be second or third line.
No, what nevertheless, the way it is phrased, if you claim that stem cell is a cure for leukemia, even if it, and somebody advertises the stem cell procedure as a cure for leukemia, he gets jailed.
Yes, Mr. President, if any treatment or treatment drugs will be clinically proven, then if it can really cure cancer, then it will not be penalized.
No, It will be penalized under the way it is.
Now, if it will be
Drafted
clinically
today.
proven,
Huh?
if it will be clinically proven that it can cure
No,
cancer.
if the advertisement claims that in this particular hospital, Dr. Juan de la Cruz is an expert on stem cell process which will cure leukemia, is the advertiser liable? My reading of your section 31 is that the advertiser goes to jail. But under your response now, Mr. President, the stem cell procedure can cure leukemia.
Well, Mr. President, if it's clinically proven, then it will not be anymore considered a false claim.
I do not know if that is a defense in the way it is crafted here. The mere fact that you claim it is a cure for leukemia is prohibited and is considered unlawful. In other words, you do not, since this is a special law, you cannot even claim that, that you cannot even prove that, in fact, stem cell is a cure, because it is the advertisement that that stem cell process is a cure that is punished as a criminal offense. Unless, if this is not so, then I would suggest that the appropriate amendment be introduced by the committee at the appropriate time, so that we can.
Yes, Mr. President, we'll take note of that. But also, before we go, as long as it's not false or misleading claims, then it will not be penalized, Mr. President. But we'll take note of those, of the concerns of the minority leader.
By the way, just for the record, who is our expert here that the sponsor is consulting? Just for the record, because we are all amateurs insofar as this is concerned. So we would like to know who is the expert.
Dr. Severino is a trained hematologist.
Doctor?
And Dr. Severino is a trained hematologist. And Dr. Rachel Rosario,
Okay.
Executive Director of the Philippine Cancer Society.
As we said, we have no objection to the enactment of this measure. We are raising these questions in order to make it to be very clear on the intention and on the manner of implementation, because this can lead us to a lot of problems and a lot of trouble.
Yes, we understand, Mr. President. I don't understand the concern of the minority. If the minority would allow, we can have a minute suspension so that we can discuss it
Sure.
freely.
We
So
can-
that
we have no objections.
it's hard because we're not experts, especially in the medical field.
Yes.
So it will be easier to discuss.
The sponsor wishes to have a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President.
The session is suspended.
Sa stem cell. Sa stem cell. Kasi pinag-sure tayo, baka mamaya may penalize tayo. Cancer din wala. Kaso kumbaga parang hindi siya name. For leukemia, yung bone marrow. Yung bone marrow. Yung bone marrow alternative. But okay. Parang hindi siya yung main treatment. Chemotherapy. Chemo pa rin. bone marrow transplant sa secondary lang. Main is still the chemo. So chemo pa rin. First line.
Nasaan na? Halika, habang di pa sila rin.
Ay, wala pa eh. Walang presiding officer, sorry.
Patimbre na rin dyan sa ano. Patimbre na rin dyan sa kasama mo. Okay, thank you. Rank classification. Your interpellation. Tingnan.
Dalawa.
Tapos yung sa donation, sana. May ang pangalan ng ano? Bureau of kasi hindi na naman. Hindi pa pwede rin. Hindi ba, international. Oo nga, paano yung local?
Ready to resume, Mr. President?
Session is resumed. Before the suspension, on the floor was Senator J.V. Ercito and the Minority Leader, Senator Frank Drilon.
Yes, Mr. President. Before the break, we were debating on the validity of and the policy under Section 31, which penalizes any advertisement of any drug or procedure or device or agent purporting to be a cure or prophylactic against cancer. And it turns out in response to our questions, the sponsor admits that in the case of stem cell procedure, it can be a cure for cancer if done at an early stage. Now, moreover, Mr. President, the reason why we're bringing this up is Section 31 can be or may be attacked on constitutional grounds as a prior restraint on the freedom of speech, which is an advertisement is certainly part of the freedom of speech. So that you hold one who is affected by the false claims is not without remedy to bring them under, to bring the advertiser under, or bring them to court. Moreover, the matter of false advertisement can be covered also by Republic Act 7394, the Consumer Act of the Philippines, which also penalizes false advertising. So it is, and for that reason, we raise an issue on the declaring as unlawful any misleading or false claims as that a drug, device, or agent is a cure against cancer. Moreover, the second sentence of Section 31 also raises questions as to who is the authority or appropriate regulatory body which can declare as unlawful and whose authority should be solicited before an advertisement is made. For these reasons, we are submitting this to the good sponsor as to how to remedy, or if he agrees with these observations that we have on the record, how do we handle Section 31?
Yes, Mr. President, this representation understands fully the concern of our minority leader, and if it will make it easier so that his concern will be addressed, we are willing to delete this section, and it will just be covered by the FDA law. We're willing to delete the Section 31 with, which talks about the penalties and unlawful acts. So it will now be covered by FDA law.
Well, we will then await the amendment of the committee on this point, and those are the only matters that we believe should be clarified in the bill, specifically Section 20 on the Cancer Assistance Fund, and on Section 31 on the making it unlawful to advertise cure, any drug or cure in cancer. So we will await the amendments of the committee, and we no longer have any question on this bill until we see the proposed amendments by the committee, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Minority Leader. Mr. President, we will submit as soon as possible the amendments regarding the two concerns of the Minority Leader. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe a few more of our colleagues would like to interpolate said measure. Sino pa? Sino? Amendments na? I close the period. Therefore, Mr. President, I stand corrected. There are no longer any reservations to interpolate. We move to close the period of interpolation. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, period of interpolation is hereby closed.
Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of the said measure.
Consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration on Senate Bill number 1629. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, consideration is in order.
This is an act waiving government fees and charges on the issuance of documents required for first application for employment of first-time job seekers. To sponsor the measure, Senator Joel Villanueva. Mr. President, to amend, to propose his amendments, Senator, the Honorable Minority Floor Leader, Senator Franklin Drilon.
The sponsor is recognized, Senator Joel Villanueva. To propose amendments, the Minority Leader, Senator Franklin Drilon.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of the good gentleman sponsor, the Majority Leader has instructed me to... No, I'm just kidding, Mr. President. I withdraw that. We will not make it public, Mr. President, we have discussed this bill off the floor with the good sponsor and an effort to expedite the passage of this very worthy measure. And we have submitted the proposed amendments to the good sponsor, and we leave it to the good sponsor to either dispose, accept, or reject the amendment. So on that basis, on the instructions of the Majority Leader, we no longer, we will not propose any amendment.
Mr. President, let me put on record that this representation would like to confirm the statements made by the Minority Floor Leader, and we have actually accepted all his proposed amendments. This being an enrolled measure, Mr. President, may I be allowed to start the individual amendments, Mr. President?
Yes, Senator Villanueva, you may proceed, but just for the record, I hear some overtones in the statement of the Minority Leader. So, is it true, Majority Leader, that the Minority Leader is your hitman?
No, Mr. President. The honest to goodness truth, Mr. President, is that all our colleagues come to me and ask me to talk to the Minority Floor Leader so that we may hasten the passage of certain measures. But the Minority Floor Leader has to study the measures carefully. And in fairness, we really appreciate the inputs of the Minority Floor Leader. We cannot be like other institutions that they pass in haste the measure without studying the
To
measure.
use the precise language of the
Minority
Majority Leader, the Majority Leader, the question is, sinong kakatayin natin ngayon? That's the... Yes. So, thank you, Mr. President, just for the record.
I've never said that, Mr. President. I always come up to him and ask him, are you prepared for these measures? Di naman, sir, katay. Wala naman tayo kinakatay dito.
We are the willing victims, Mr. President.
So that's
So
just for the
there
record,
is no
Mr. President.
truth to the rumor.
No,
That
sir.
the Minority Leader is
No,
the
sir.
hitman of the Majority Leader.
No, sir.
All right.
He's just
sir.
making sure that there is quality control with the
All right.
passage of these measures.
Senator Villanueva, you're recognized for the period of amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader, and to the Minority Floor Leader. On page 1, line 2, delete phrase of 2017. On page 2, delete lines 1 to 5 and insert the following. Letter B, an early school leaver. C, a person not employed or engaged in education or training who were not previously enrolled in any educational institution or who have not finished secondary education. D, a student taking a leave of absence from an institution offering college or tertiary education or from a technical vocational course, or letter E, any person working part-time while enrolled in an academic institution. The provision shall now read as follows, Mr. President. Section 3, coverage. The provisions of this act shall apply to all first-time job seekers, which shall include the following. A, new graduates from all schools, colleges, and universities and from accredited institutions offering technical vocational courses. For purposes of this act, a new graduate is a Filipino who just finished a bachelor's degree from any college or university or completed a technical vocational course from any accredited institution in the Philippines, as well as high school graduates who have completed the K-12 program. Letter B, an early school leaver. Letter C, a person not employed or engaged in education or training who were not previously enrolled in any educational institution or who have not finished secondary education. Letter D, a student taking a leave of absence from an institution offering college or tertiary education or from a technical vocational course, or letter E, any person working part-time while enrolled in an academic institution. This coverage, Mr. President, was amended in view of the interpellation of the Honorable Minority Floor Leader, Senator Frank Drilon, and we thank his office for their substantial input in reaching our final amendments.
Any objection? Chair hears none. The amendment is adopted.
On page 2, delete lines 13 to 14 and replace the following. Section 5, covered governmental transactions, no fees and other charges shall be collected from first-time job seekers when obtaining the following, subject to the restriction in Section 6. I so move.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Amendment is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 2, line 15, delete the phrase, subject to the restriction in Section 6. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Amendment is adopted.
On page 2, delete lines 18 to 19 and replace the following with the following. Letter D, medical certificate from public hospitals, provided that the fees and charges collected for laboratory testing and other medical procedures pursuant to the grant of a medical certificate shall not be included. The provision shall now read as follows. Section 5, covered governmental transactions, no fees and other charges shall be collected from first-time job seekers when obtaining the following, subject to the restrictions in Section 6. A, police clearance certificate. B, National Bureau of Investigation, NBI clearance. C, barangay clearance. D, medical certificate from public hospitals, provided that the fees and charges collected for laboratory testing and other medical procedures pursuant to the grant of a medical certificate shall not be included. Letter E, birth and or marriage certificate. Letter F, tax identification number. Letter G, the Unified Multipurpose ID or UMID. And letter H, other documentary requirements issued by the government that may be required by employers for first-time job seekers. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, amendment is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 2, delete lines 25 to 35. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, amendment is adopted.
On page 3, delete lines 1 to 20 and insert the following. Section 6, proof of eligibility. First-time job seekers availing the benefits provided under this act shall present a duly sworn and subscribed affidavit stating any of the following. Letter A, that he or she is a new graduate of an academic or technical vocational institution indicating her date of graduation. Letter B, that he or she is an early school leaver indicating his or her date of last enrollment. Letter C, that she is a student taking a leave of absence from an institution offering college or tertiary education or from a technical vocational course. Letter D, that he or she is working part-time while enrolled in an academic institution or from an institution offering a technical vocational education. Or letter E, that he or she is not engaged in education or training and has not previously enrolled in any education institution or has not finished secondary education. In case of doubt in the application of this act or in the evaluation of the document submitted, an interpretation most favorable to the applicant shall prevail, provided that any person found guilty of fabricating or falsifying any document required under this section shall be liable under Article 172 of the revised Penal Code. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, amendment is adopted.
Last page, Mr. President, on page 3, delete lines 31 to 35. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Amendment is adopted.
On page 4, after line 8, insert new sections 10, 11, and 12, which shall read as follows. Section 10, non-authority to charge fees. This act shall not be construed as an implied authority for all government agencies to impose or collect charges and fees in relation to the discharge of their functions, if no such authority is already granted under the respective charters or other relevant laws. Section 11, exclusion of Job Start Program applicants as beneficiaries. The beneficiaries of the Job Start Program under Republic Act number 10869 and other laws that give fee exemptions for the documents and or transactions enumerated herein shall not be qualified from availing of the benefits of this act. Section 12, interpretation in favor of the applicant. In all cases, any ambiguity in the interpretation on the implementation of this act shall be in favor of the applicant. Let me point out, Mr. President, that with regard to the new Section 10, we are inserting this provision to emphasize that a government agency can only charge fees for services if the agency's charter expressly allows for it. And with regard to new section, Section 11, this amendment prohibits a person who is granted fee exemptions under other laws from availing of the benefits of this measure in order to avoid excessive claims. That's all, Mr. President. I so move.
Any objection? There being none, amendment is adopted.
I would just like to put on record, Mr. President, and move to renumber also sections accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, amendment is adopted.
That is all, Mr. President, and thank you very much to our distinguished Minority Floor Leader, the co-sponsors of this measure, Senator Sani Angara, Senator J.V. Ejercito, Senator Nancy Binay, Senator Grace Post, Senator Mig Zubiri, Senator Ralph Recto, and Senator Bam Aquino. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Majority Leader?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. There being no other amendments to the measure, we move to close the period of amendments. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? The chair hears none. The period of amendments is hereby closed.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill number 1629. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Senate Bill 1629 is approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of the same.
Consideration of the measure is suspended.
We'd like to also, on the topic of Senator Joel Villanueva, the sponsor, he also submitted to us, Mr. President, Secretariat, his co-sponsorship speech on Senate Bill number 2024. This is the creation of the Philippine Rice Development Authority.
The Secretariat is directed to place that into the record.
Thank you, Mr. President. Si Manny. Thank you, Mr. President. Hindi ko sinabi kata eh. So we move to resume consideration on Senate Bill number 1515. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, Senate Bill 1515's consideration is in order.
This is an act strengthening the Philippine Sports Commission, amending for purpose Republic Act 6847. The status of the measures in the period of interpellation, Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Emmanuel Manny Pacquiao, our pambansang kamao, and to interpellate the Honorable Minority Floor Leader, Senator Franklin Drilon. So moved, Mr. President.
Senator Manny Pacquiao is recognized to sponsor the measure, and the Minority Leader, Senator Frank Drilon, is recognized to interpolate.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Just for the record, it was not my intention to interpolate on this bill, but the majority leader said interpolate. So I am just following instructions, Mr. President. As you said, I am the hitman of the majority leader. So pasensya na po si Senator Pacquiao at maraming utos po ang ating majority leader. To start with, Mr. President, what does Senate Bill 1515 seek to achieve?
The bill, Mr. President, is increasing coordinating and collaboration with the Department of Interior and Local Government, the LG Department of Education, DepEd, Commission on Higher Education, CHED, and national and local government units. Increase focus on sports science and sports medicine through institutionalization of the Philippine Sports Institute as an additional bureau of the Commission, and no longer be required as a requisite for the PEC to recognize the NSA.
Mr. President, that's a little broad, but let me focus on some of the specific areas that the good sponsor mentioned in his sponsorship speech. In your sponsorship speech, Mr. President, you asked what went wrong, referring to our performance in international sporting tournaments, and given our dismal performance in the most recent Asian Games, this question is very appropriate. The good sponsor answered that question by the statement, one reason is the budget allocation. Kulela tayo sa budget. Another reason is the poor sports facilities in our country. They are
Yes.
dilapidated and outdated. Mr. President, just on this specific issue, how does the bill address the issue of lack of budget and lack of sports facilities vis-a-vis the changes in the powers of the Philippine Sports Commission? If this is what, in the view of the sponsor, ails the Philippine sports, meaning the lack of budget and sports facilities, how does the bill address these problems, Mr. President? Because my impression, and I may be wrong, that it appears more to be a budgetary concern, and therefore the remedy is in the General Appropriations Act.
Mr. President, currently the Philippine Sports Commission getting funding from PAGCOR is not enough to support our athletes and to all the needs of the Philippine sports. So that's why in this proposed bill, mission, Mr. President, is there will be changes, and we'll get more from not only in PAGCOR but also in PCSO, Mr. President.
You know, Mr. President, when this representation was the Justice Secretary, we rendered an opinion which corrected the amount or the computation of the amounts due to the Philippine Sports Commission in terms of the base for the percentage of PAGCOR funds that will be remitted. It was an interpretation that we crafted in order to reflect correctly the intention of Congress and at the same time increase the allocation of the Philippine Sports Commission. Is the gentleman aware of this? Because the next question is, may we know what exactly is the support that the Philippine Sports Commission is getting from the PAGCOR pursuant to this law, pursuant to the existing law and the interpretation which we did as Secretary of Justice.
Mr. President, the current law is the Philippine Sport Commission supposedly will get 5% from PAGCOR, but they didn't really get the 5%, only 2.5%, Mr. President,
I'm sorry,
annually.
I think the computation, the issue was what will be the basis of the 5%, if I recall correctly. And we interpreted it in a manner that is more favorable to the Sports Commission. Since the issue that the good sponsor has presented in his sponsorship speech, I think it is proper to spread into the record exactly where we are in terms of the budgetary support of our sporting community. In fact, the Commission on Audit has ruled in last month that the Commission Audit says PAGCOR owes the Philippine Sports Commission 4 billion pesos in remittances. And this is because of the opinion that we rendered years back on the manner of or where the 5% will be based. And there are a few things in this government that I can claim credit for. One of them is to increase the remittance of the PAGCOR to the Philippine Sports Commission. So that's why we would like to know what exactly is the status insofar as the funding is concerned. How much does PSC get from PAGCOR, and what has it done in order to follow the opinion that we rendered as confirmed by the COA?
What I heard, Mr. President, is the PEC wrote a letter to PAGCOR to demand to get the exact percentage that they are getting, supposedly getting from PAGCOR, but the PAGCOR, Mr. President, they're not following on the request or the requirements, the 5%, Mr. President.
Yeah, but then this good sponsor, by his own sponsorship speech, Mr. President, should take the lead in insisting on PAGCOR that the support for the Philippine Sports Commission should be fulfilled, should be on top of their agenda, because we hear a lot about the expenses on on the remittances of PAGCOR for projects which are often subject to question. But here, this is a mandate of the law, and yet PAGCOR is not complying with their mandate. What do we do with this, Mr. Chairman? As the first line of policy, that as the first line of a policy thrust that can alleviate the sorry state of our sporting industry.
That's right, Mr. President. I initially talked to PAGCOR, Mr. President, to give the complete 5% to PEC, and they said there is a case filed in the Supreme Court by Congressman Yang Giao, and they're waiting for that decision. And then I told them, Mr. President, that how about the PEC? They need the support from us, from PAGCOR, especially PAGCOR. So until now, Mr. President, I have not heard from them about their comment and position about that.
So, Mr. President, nothing in this bill will further the cause of Philippine Sports Commission insofar as funding from PAGCOR is concerned, which is already mandated by law. I do not see how an additional law could alleviate the difficulties of Philippine Sports Commission at this point when another agency of government refuses to remit to PAGCOR what is due PAGCOR under the law. Shouldn't we do something about this before we have a new amendment? This is something that is simply not acceptable to this representation. I do not know how the good sponsor looks at this, but to me this is a crime that we are making our athletes and our Philippine Sports Commission suffer because of the insistence of PAGCOR on a wrong interpretation of the law.
I agree with you, Mr. President.
So hindi ba dapat patawag muna natin ang PAGCOR at sabihin bakit hindi nyo niremit itong 4 na bilyong piso?
We will call them again, Mr. President.
Yes, because this is, you know, I would in my book, the major portion of the reform in our sporting community is the lack of funding as asserted by the good sponsor itself. But precisely, there is a situation where a government agency tasked to fund the Philippine Sports Commission by an act of Congress does not perform its function. So that is why the sorry state of the Philippine Sports Commission has been attributed by the good sponsor correctly to the lack of funds. But then since PAGCOR is not doing anything, even if we pass 100 laws, if PAGCOR still continue to refuse to remit what is properly the Philippine Sports Commission funds, they can never hope to get out of where we are today to start with. Would the sponsor agree with that?
Yes, Mr. President. And beside that, Mr. President, the changes of this bill, Mr. President, is we can get more more funds and from other sources, Mr. President, like PCSO. Kasi yung loto, Mr. President, before sweepstakes lang, pero ngayon may luto na, so I think we can get more funds from funding from there.
Mr. President, I cannot accept the proposition that we need a law to increase the contribution or to encourage these PAGCOR and PCSO to increase their contribution to the amateur sports. But let's leave that beside. In the meantime, let's leave that issue behind. And we would like to hear from the good sponsor the next time that this bill is called what progress has been made to compel PAGCOR to comply with the law insofar as support for Philippine sports is concerned, because per finding of the COA, PAGCOR already owes 4 billion to the Philippine sporting community, and the lame excuse that it is pending in the Supreme Court is nothing more but a lame excuse, because the case in the Supreme Court, if I recall correctly, is precisely filed by Mr. Giao in order to compel PAGCOR to remit, and they are resisting.
That's
now
correct, Mr. President.
they are trying to say, no, we wait for the decision of the Supreme Court. They are benefiting from their own resistance, Mr. President. This is not acceptable. Why cannot, this is not going to any member of the Senate or the House. This 4 billion by law is supposed to go to our Philippine Sports Commission for amateur sports. So the first blame is on PAGCOR. And
I agree with you, Mr. President.
hindi po kailangan ang bagong batas para po matulungan ang ating Philippine Sports Commission and our sports in general. But having said that, is it correct that as I said, we will revisit this issue at some future time when the bill is again presented for debates. But just to start on the substantive aspect, is it correct to say that the Philippine Sports Commission is basically a policy-making body on amateur sports today? Is that a correct proposition, Mr. President?
Mr. President, currently, Mr. President, the Philippine Sport Commission is a policy maker, Mr. President. But in the bill, Mr. President, policy and regulatory body, Mr. President.
In fact, in the bill, it will transform the Philippine Sports Commission from simply a policy-making body to a coordinating body and an implementing body, all rolled in one. Is that the policy that we seek to promulgate here by this law? In other words, the implementing agency, for example, for the school sports program is the DepEd. Ang mangyayari po, maging Philippine Sports Commission ang implementing agency. The budget will go to the Philippine Sports Commission. All the officials will be designated by the Philippine Sports Commission. Ganon din po insofar as the CHED is concerned. Again, it will be the Philippine Sports Commission now, which will formulate and implement, which means all the budget goes to them. Eh kung kulang na nga yung budget nila, dadagdagan pa natin ang kanilang trabaho. And then, the Philippine Sports Commission, if we approve this law, will also formulate and implement a local government sports development program, which is presently under the local government units. We would like to open up for debate whether this is a correct policy or not. What is wrong with the present policy where the Sports Commission is a policy-making body, and why is it that we now want to expand the jurisdiction to include implementation and taking over from DEX, taking over from the local government units?
It will closely coordinated, Mr. President, to the DepEd, Mr. President, this with DepEd and the ALG, Mr. President, and so that we can have a unified sports program, Mr. President, all over the nation, Mr. President, all over the country.
Well,
Para hindi watak-watak, Mr. President, yung ano natin,
hindi
sports
ko po
natin.
nakikita kung bakit ang ating sistema ngayon is the cause, allegedly, of the disunity. There are factors other than the present setup which causes disunity. We all have heard and always have heard complaints about how politics intervene in our sports development program. How would this bill eliminate that conception that it is the politics in the Philippine Sports Commission which in fact is a hindrance to our sports development? What if that is a problem, if that problem is accepted as a problem, how does the bill resolve that?
Okay. Mr. President, we will have closely coordinated with them, and so we'll have we'll have support efforts and all the agencies that will coordinated with this PEC, Mr. President. That's our goal, and our efforts is going to be solid, Mr. President.
Mr. President, at this stage, I've been getting signals from the Majority Leader that we suspend the interpellation because he wants the interpellation again to take place tomorrow. So upon the instructions of the Majority Leader, Mr. President, I suspend the interpellation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. President.
Majority
I did
Leader.
not make any signs to the Minority Leader. As a matter of fact, I was looking at my phone. But I'm sure the Minority Leader, he's been very active today, interpolating 3 measures, and we know
Thank
that...
you, Mr. President. I would like to thank the
Health
Minority
as well.
Leader, Franklin.
Yeah, so with the indulgence of the good sponsor, we'll do it another day. So with that, Mr. President. Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I support the measure because I'm pro-sports, and my good compadre knows that, although we must make sure that the questions raised by Senator Dillon should be answered. Very important on the collection of PSC with PAGCOR. Yeah, I know. They owe them a lot of money. So with that, Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of the measure.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Motion is approved.
Yeah, speech lang ni Senator Nancy. No. Relax ka muna, boss. Relax ka muna.
Wala kaming Emmanuel, ah. Nakadalawang Emmanuel ka ngayon.
Relax ka muna. Bukas na. Mr. President, I move to resume consideration on Senate Bill number 2023. I so move.
Any objection? Chair hears none. Motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'd like to recognize the co-sponsor of the measure, Senator Nancy Binay, who will deliver a co-sponsorship speech on this bill.
2023.
That's correct.
Yes. Senator Nancy Binay is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Mr. President, it is my honor and privilege to co-sponsor Senate Bill number 2023, or the Special Protection of Children in Situations of Armed Conflict Act. The recent conflicts in several parts of the country have brought to light several instances of children either recruited or forced by armed groups to become combatants or to support combat operations. Worse, there were reports of children being sold by their own parents to these groups. Mr. President, still, much more is the number of children who were caught in the crossfire in these conflicts, either confined in evacuation centers or forced to flee to other areas. In some instances, children were either killed, maimed, kidnapped, or raped. According to the United Nations Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict in 2017 alone, there were 33 children who were either killed or maimed, 30 children who were recruited or used by armed groups, 12 children were detained for alleged association with armed groups, 3 cases of rape by the Maute group, and 5 cases of abduction in our country. Mr. President, children are supposed to be zones of peace under the law, but how many more children will become direct combatants or used to support operations such as cooks or medical personnel? How many will be killed, maimed, detained, raped, or kidnapped? How many will be bakwits, confined to evacuation centers while the fighting rages on? According to Dr. Elizabeth Protasio de Castro, a professor at the UP Psychology Department, in a 2001 journal article, that there are many factors why children end up fighting with adults, Mr. President. These children may have been victims of physical or sexual abuse or witnesses to the death of a loved one in the hands of government forces. Some factors are more complex. There may be experiences of neglect and abuse, weak family ties, and negative experiences in school, or a combination of all the above. Poverty, social injustice, and limited or no access to basic services are contributing factors to the creation of the child soldier. Being exposed to armed conflict situations, children are exposed not only to grave and serious physical danger, but also to psychological trauma resulting from capture, torture, rape, and detention. Having experiences also result in child soldiers living with shame and guilt and reacting with apathy and numbness for the rest of their lives. They are faced with extremely polarized moral dilemmas such as self-preservation and killing another human being for the glory of God, freedom, and the oppressed people. Should they be taken out of armed conflict situations, child soldiers find difficulty in rejoining their communities or having normal lives. Often, they return to their comrades in the battlefields. While the Philippines is a signatory of the United Nations Optional Protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the Involvement of Children in Armed Conflict and have enacted Republic Act 7610, there remains much work to safeguard the rights of children, especially those facing or caught in armed conflict. This representation had previously filed Senate Resolution number 396, urging the proper Senate committees to study the UN Optional Protocol with the intention of strengthening the implementation and improving legislations involving children's rights. SB 2023 takes it even further and expands the relevant provisions of RA 7610 concerning children in armed conflict. The bill grants more rights to children and lists prohibited acts as well as prescribing penalties to these crimes. Government is also tasked to prevent the recruitment and or re-recruitment of children in armed conflict. The rehabilitation and reintegration of children and their rescue and release are also proposed and provided for in the bill. Mr. President, as we push for the passage of this proposed law, we also urge for continued peace-building efforts, as well as the strengthening of government services, such as the adequate and effective provision of basic social services to the people, especially in the countryside, and the recognition and respect of different ideas, cultures, and traditions. This representation believes that we can prevent some, if not all, armed conflict from happening through these efforts. However, the passage of Senate Bill 2023 will ensure that children's rights will be protected and safeguarded if and when armed conflict happens. And I appeal to my colleagues for the speedy passage of this measure. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Binay, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would like to recognize as well Senator J.V. Ejercito for his sponsorship speech, co-sponsorship.
Senator Ejercito is recognized.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd just like to move that my co-sponsorship speech be inserted into the records.
Noted. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of the said measure.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to resume consideration Senate Bill number 1597. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Yes, this is the act institutionalizing the grant of student fare discounts for public transportation. Very noble measure, Mr. President. We'd like to recognize the sponsor, Senator Sonny Angara, for the amendments. We are in the period of amendments, Mr. President.
Senator Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. We just have one amendment on page 3 to delete the section 9. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
No other amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Sorry, Mr. President. Just can we renumber the sections accordingly?
Okay.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
No other amendments.
No other amendments, Mr. President, Majority Leader.
There being no amendments proposed by our colleagues and the committee, we move to close the period of amendments. I so
Is
move.
there any objection? There being none, motion is approved. May I manifest for the record that the presiding officer be made, with the permission of the sponsor, a co-author of the measure.
Certainly, it would be an honor. Thank you.
Can I also be, Mr.
President.
President, I'd like to ask the the sponsor?
Yes, it would be
If I
a
can
great,
remain.
great honor.
All those who are present in the hall, Mr. President,
Thank you.
if there are no objections from our colleagues, this is such a noble measure. Many other countries, Europe and United States, offer student discounts for public transport and other, even public utilities and all that. So this is a very, very noble effort by the sponsor. Thank you for accepting us as your co-sponsor.
Thank you, Majority. Thank you
Call
to the presiding officer, Mr. President.
With that, Mr. President, I move to approve on second reading Senate Bill number 1597. I
Is
so
there-
move, Mr.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
I move to suspend consideration for this.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader and our
Thank you
colleagues.
very much. Congratulations. May we move for the additional reference of business, Mr. President?
The Secretariat is recognized.
Second additional reference of business, committee reports. Committee report number 477, submitted jointly by the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, and Finance on Senate number 1917, introduced by Senators Legarda and Angara, entitled, An Act Granting Survivorship Benefits to the Dependent Children of a Deceased Retired Member of the Commission on Audit, Civil Service Commission, Commission on Elections, and the Ombudsman who is a solo parent or the surviving parents or nominated persons of such deceased retiree, amending for the purpose Republic Act number 10084, entitled, An Act Granting Survivorship Benefits to the Surviving Legitimate Spouse of a Deceased Retired Member of the Commission on Audit, Civil Service Commission, Commission on Elections, and the Ombudsman, and for other purposes, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Trillanes IV.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 478, submitted by the Committee on Justice and Human Rights on House number 7387, introduced by Representative Garcia et al., entitled, An Act Granting Philippine Citizenship to Kwok Hing Carlos Yung, recommending its approval without amendment, taking into consideration Senate number 1602, sponsor Senator Richard J. Gordon.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 479, submitted by the Committee on Justice and Human Rights on Senate number 1273, introduced by Senator Richard J. Gordon, entitled, An Act Granting Philippine Citizenship to Bruce Donald McTavish, recommending its approval without amendment, taking into consideration House number 7388, sponsor Senator Richard J. Gordon.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 480, submitted by the Committee on Justice and Human Rights on House number 7179, introduced by Representative Macapagal Arroyo et al., entitled, An Act Granting Philippine Citizenship to Maylene Ting, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsors Senator Richard J. Gordon.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 481, submitted by the Committee on Justice and Human Rights on House number 7180, introduced by Representative Tiangco et al., entitled, An Act Granting Philippine Citizenship to Father Julian C. Matsana, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Richard J. Gordon.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Are you ready? Are you ready for that sponsor? Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we, with the permission of the body, that I move that we transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to the calendar of special orders. House Bill number 7387.
Daya nito, inuna niya yung pare, teacher niya.
House Bill number, this one, huh? Okay. House Bill number 7388, House Bill number 7179, and House Bill number 7180. This is an omnibus motion, Mr. President. I so move.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we, with the permission of our body, I move that we consider House Bill number 7387, House Bill number 7388, House Bill number 7179, and House Bill number 7180. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title of each measure?
House Bills number 7387, an act granting Philippine citizenship to Kwok Hing Carlos Yung. House number 7388, an act granting Philippine citizenship to Bruce Donald McTavish. House number 7179, an act granting Philippine citizenship to Maylin Ting. House number 7180, an act granting Philippine citizenship to Father Julian C. Mathana.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, the chairman of the Committee on Justice, no other than Senator Richard Dick Gordon.
Senator Gordon is recognized to sponsor the measures.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I apologize for, I had given a prior excuse that I would not be able to attend the early part of the sessions this afternoon because of my duties in the Judicial Bar Council, and it is kind of elongated and extended. But however, I have the great honor of sponsoring today an omnibus sponsorship speech on committee report numbers 478, 479, 480, 481, recommending without amendment of House bills on the Philippine citizenship of Carlos Kwok Hing Yung. He is in the back. Would you please stand up, sir? And he's from Cebu. And then you have Bruce Donald McTavish, a very famous world referee from the Philippines, stayed half a century here already. I think it looks like he has spent more than half a century here. And married to a very dear friend of mine and a very esteemed daughter of a very esteemed citizen, the Tayags of Pampango, and my Lin Ting, graduate of MIT, master's degree and a Stanford degree, and who owns one of the big businesses in Angeles, Pampanga. And Father Julian C. Mazana, if our distinguished majority floor leader has graduated to be a gentleman of the highest order, you may credit the order of Father Julian Mazana. I don't know if he will take full responsibility for the majority floor leader. Mr. President, as you know, citizenship is very, very important. It is not just given, especially a congressional vote on citizenship, Mr. President. In the case of Republic vs. Cambran Carbasi, GR number 210412, the Supreme Court citing Father Joaquin Berna stressed the consequences of citizenship. The citizenship is personal and more or less a permanent membership in a political community. It denotes possession within that particular political community of full civil and political rights subject to special disqualifications. Reciprocally, it imposes the duty of allegiance to the political community. The core of citizenship is the capacity to enjoy political rights, that is the right to participate in government, principally through the right to vote, the right to hold public office, and the right to petition the government for redress of grievance. Certain economic rights are also reserved to Philippine citizens by the Constitution, including the right to invest in certain areas of the economy as determined by Congress as provided under Section 10 of Article 12, and the right to practice professions except as prescribed by Congress as provided under Section 14 of Article 12. As held by the Supreme Court in Kwaki Tan C versus Republic of the Philippines, GR number 11-18-006, granting Philippine citizenship is not a right, but one of privilege, of the most discriminating as well as delicate and exacting nature, affecting as it does public interest of the highest order. Justice Amorfina Menencio Herrera, in her dissenting opinion in the case of Aznar versus Commission on Elections et al., GR number 83820, described Philippine citizenship as a priceless heritage. Under Article 4 of the Constitution, there are two general ways by which the Philippine citizenship may be acquired. First, by parentage or blood relationship with a father or with a mother who should be a Filipino citizen in either case. And second, by naturalization, which is the act of adopting a foreigner and clothing him or her with the privileges of a natural-born citizen of the Philippines. The naturalization of foreigners is an act of grace, not a right. It is a privilege to be given, qualified, or withheld as the state acting through Congress may determine. Of course, Mr. President, we took due diligence of the committee. We had about 4 hearings, Mr. President, very exhaustive ones. The Committee on Justice and Human Rights, your committee, exercised the due diligence required in checking the background of the 4 persons subject of the aforementioned bills. In fact, 2 bills were standard, and perhaps when they clear the requirements, we will be able to present them in about a couple of weeks or before we close. Specifically, the committee required clearances from the relevant agencies of the government, namely the National Bureau of Investigation, the PNP, National Police, Bureau of Immigration, Department of Foreign Affairs, Department of Justice, Office of the Solicitor General, Special Committee on Naturalization, and the barangays of residents for any regulatory record. The National Intelligence Coordinating Agency posed no objections. 2, require the submission of affidavits of at least 2 credible witnesses to attest to their moral character, belief in the principles underlying the Philippine Constitution, and social conduct. Required proof of employment or lawful trade, profession, or occupation from the applicants. Required income tax returns for the previous 3 years and receipts of payment of income tax. And 5, required the applicants to show their state of health. Mr. President, I ask the advice of my good friend, Senate President Drilon, recently whether I can sponsor this in toto, because this is my first time. I'm a prima para sponsor. But he said we could just make an all-encompassing sponsorship. But out of respect to the Senate, I just wanted to delineate the way upon which we went through this citizenship process. In sum, the committee applied the qualifications under Commonwealth Act number 473, or the revised naturalization law, by analogy to be consistent with our rules on citizenship. The committee has determined that the following applicants have satisfactorily complied with the foregoing requirements. I think many of them were also surprised at the questions that we asked, including Philippine history and many other things that were important, I think, that they ought to know, and they were asked to review their history as well on the Philippines. So we start, Mr. President, with our good friend and Senate Majority Floor Leader, Father Julian Mazana. House Bill number 7180 under Committee Report number 4816 to grant Philippine citizenship to Julian Z. Mazana. Father Julian Mazana is a citizen of Spain. He was born in Spain on 30 July 1961 and ordained as a Catholic priest of the Order of St. Augustine in 1986. He has been a missionary priest for 28 years and he's resided in the Philippines for the same number of years. In 1990, Father Mazana was assigned to the Colegio San Agustin in Makati, where he has been the assistant principal of the high school department since 1997, molding students to be responsible members of society, one of which is our majority floor leader. I don't know if it was done intentionally or accidentally. But let me just say, Mr. President, of course, this is just a privileged remark on my part, just to make sure that Senator Zubiri listens. Aside from being assistant principal, Father Mazana is also the treasurer, vice rector, Order of St. Augustine, vicarial treasurer, and counselor. Father Mazana was assigned to coordinate and oversee the different construction and physical improvement projects of the Augustinian Vicariate in the Philippines, including the renovation of the Immaculate Conception Parish, Church of San Agustin in Intramuros, Manila, the oldest church in the Philippines, and a UNESCO World Heritage Site, working with the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. The renovation of the ancient monastery of San Agustin in Intramuros as a museum, which I'm very familiar with as former Secretary of Tourism, where the best collection of religious artifacts in the Philippines are kept, and assisted in the raising of funds for the construction of 4 chapels in Baseco compound to serve the poorest of the poor under the parish of Convento San Agustin. Father Mazana is one of the incorporators of the Vicariate of the Orient Incorporated, a non-stock, non-profit domestic association established to propagate the Roman Catholic faith and its learnings, grant scholarships to deserving students engaged in social projects and charitable activities, and promote religious and historical arts. What is very touching is that Father Mazana still has her mother in Spain. And when asked about whether her mother approves of it, she said, it will be the happiest day of his life when he gets to be a citizen of this country, and tells his mother that he is now a citizen of the Philippines, Mr. President. Can you imagine being separated from your family and your native country and staying here in the Philippines? And it is important for us to accept this, because many people like us are born by accident, but not citizens by choice. So the people here that we're sponsoring today are citizens by choice, Mr. President. Let me now go to Bruce McTavish, House Bill number 7388, taking into consideration Senate Bill number 1273, authored by yours truly under Committee Report number 479, seeks to grant Philippine citizenship to Bruce Donald McTavish. Bruce Donald McTavish is a native of New Zealand. Was born in Auckland, New Zealand on 11 October 1940. He has been a resident of the Philippines since 12 February 1967. or about 8 days before my father was assassinated, or 51 years today when he settled in Angeles City, Pampanga, where he provided exemplary contributions as sportsman, entrepreneur, civic leader, philanthropist, and youth builder. He is married to Carmen Tayag Mactavish, a graduate of the University of the Philippines. The whole Tayag family came, all a dozen of them, I think, all graduated from the University of the Philippines. A Filipina with whom he has 2 children, Jean Maria and Michelle Margaret, both of whom studied in Philippine schools. I think they're here today, and they took after the mother, as you can see, in terms of beauty and brains. Thank you. Since then, he has served as a boxing referee, representing the Philippines and has spearheaded seminars sponsored by the World Boxing Council and the Games and Amusement Board for boxing officials around the country. He has refereed boxing matches in several countries, including the United States of America, China, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, the United Arab Emirates, and even North Korea. And every time he referees, he's known as as a boxing referee from the Philippines. He has also been a director of the Professional Boxing Association, Philippines. Outside sports, Mr. McTavish also left an imprint as an entrepreneur, being one of the pioneer investors of the Clark Special Economic Zone, now the Clark Freeport. He has served in various capacities the Metro Angeles Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Hotel and Restaurant Association of the Philippines. Mr. McTavish was there when Pinatubo erupted, Mr. President, and he could have left, but he stayed the course. Mr. McTavish has also been active in civic affairs, having served as president of the Rotary Club of Mabalacat, Pampanga, and the Rotary Club of Clark Centennial. He, together with other members, formed the Rotary Club of Clark Centennial Street Children Foundation, Incorporated. Always an extra hand to the poor and the vulnerable. He is a staunch advocate of the rights of street children, raising funds to support the education and subsistence of 71 school children and providing lodging to 35 of them. During his term as president of the Rotary Club of Mabalacat from 1983 to 1984, he introduced the world's first Polio Plus project, the pilot program that became the template for Rotary International's successful drive for the eradication of polio throughout most of the world. That's a very salutary project, Mr. President, the eradication of polio in the Philippines. Mr. McTavish has been recognized as an honorary citizen of Angeles City in 2000, has received the World Boxing Council Referee of the Year award twice, and the Most Outstanding Kapampangan Award for Sports in 2016 by the Pampanga Press Club. Finally, Mr. McTavish has finally been the subject of several citizenships filed in previous Congresses, including one filed by my good friend, and our Senate Minority Leader and former President of the Senate, Senator Franklin Drilon. On Mylene Ting, Mr. President, House Bill number 7179 under Committee Report number 486 to grant Philippine citizenship to Mylene Ting. Mylene Ting is an American citizen born in Portland, Oregon, United States of America on 14 June 1977 to Sylvia Chen and Elon Ting, both Chinese citizens. She is married to a British citizen, and together they have 3 children. She's practically an international citizen. You know, her ethnic background is Chinese, and she was born an American citizen, married a British citizen, and now desires to be a Filipino citizen, which has been her dream for a long, long time. Ms. Ting and her family came to the Philippines on 30 December 1978 and established their home in Forbes Park, Makati City. Since then, the Ting family embraced the Philippines as their permanent home. But of course, they did not stay in Forbes Park. They put up business in Pampanga, where they set up a factory that is well known in Pampanga, that even the mayor of Pampanga and the mayor of Mabalacat has also lobbied for his citizenship because of their contributions to the community. Ms. Ting enrolled and finished her primary and secondary education international in Manila from 1983 to 1933 and was therefore granted permanent residency. Later, she went to the United States of America for college, studying mechanical engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and later for graduate school, taking up and finishing the Bachelor's in Business Administration degree from Stanford University. Both excellent universities. In 1987, Mr. Elon Ting established in Mabalacat, Pampanga, the Trans International Paper Corporation, TIPCO, which has been engaged in the business of manufacturing newsprint and is the only local newsprint manufacturer capable of producing export quality paper, exporting to customers including the Singapore Straits Times, Times of India, South China Morning Post, and others. TIPCO has also been engaged in printing and writing and packaging grades of paper, all using 100% post-consumer recycled paper. I emphasize recycled paper. In other words, there is no degradation of the environment practically, and operated by 100% Filipino labor force. TIPCO, together with its affiliated companies, directly employs almost 1,000 Filipinos and is one of Mabalacat City's, Pampanga's largest taxpayers. It also takes part in corporate social responsibility programs such as tree planting, river cleanups, adopt a river drives, nutrition and feeding campaigns, school painting activities, donation drives, medical missions, and livelihood teaching sessions. In January 2008, Ms. Ting and her family moved back to the Philippines to manage the companies her parents established. Her family established residency in Bonifacio, Global City, and she now has 3 children, 2 of whom were born here in the Philippines. Ms. Ting has been a part of the establishment and operations of various power generating companies and continued to be a director of ANDA Power Supply Corporation, Seoul Energy Systems, TIPCO Estates Corporation, and Panay Electric Development Corporation. In 2016, the Sangguniang Panglusud of Mabalacat City, Pampanga granted Ms. Ting a commendation for her invaluable services to the city of Mabalacat, province of Pampanga, and recommending grant of Philippine citizenship to Ms. Mylene Ting. The last one, Mr. President, for today is Mr. Carlos Kwok Hin Yung. He is not unfamiliar to most of us. House Bill number 7387, taking into consideration Senate Bill number 1602, authored by Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri, under Committee Report number 478, seeks to grant Philippine citizenship to Carlos Kwok Hin Yung. Carlos Kwok Hin Yung is a 72-year-old British national overseas born in Hong Kong on 5 November 1946. To parents who were both British national overseas in Hong Kong. He has, however, worked and lived and resided as if he were a Filipino for over 40 years. While most Hong Kong people go to Vancouver, so much so that they call it Hongkouver, Mr. Kwok Hin Yung decided to stay in the Philippines. Mr. Yung first came to the Philippines in 1978, where he later married a Cebuana. Everybody knows her. Very charming, very amiable, Mariquita Salimbangon, and made Cebu the home of his growing family and the focus of his ventures as an entrepreneur. In Hong Kong, Mr. Yung was a partner of the diamond dealer Simplex Dian Hong Kong Limited. He later expanded his investments in the Philippines through MSY Holdings Incorporated, of which he is vice chairman. It is engaged in businesses of real estate development, hospitality, and health and fitness. It is also responsible for building 2 distinct landmarks in Cebu, the Candaya Resort, a luxury beach resort in Daang Bantayan, in northern Cebu, and the MSY Tower, the premier business address at the Cebu Business Park, Cebu City. Mr. Yung's business ventures have created employment opportunities for thousands of Filipinos. Mr. Yung has also engaged himself in philanthropy through the MSY Foundation, through which he has funded the construction of health centers and the conduct of medical, surgical, dental missions in depressed areas in Cebu province, a medical assistance program for indigent patients, assistance for the repair and reconstruction of public schools, financial assistance to poor and deserving students, relief operations in times of natural calamity, including Yolanda, and support to religious, social, civil, and political projects. Civil and cultural projects, my mistake. Its flagship project is Operation Smile, which helps children with cleft lip and cleft palate and has given over 5,000 children a new shot at life. All 4, Bruce Donald McTavish, kindly stand up please so that you can be recognized, have Mylene Ting, Father Julian Mazana, and Carlos Kwok Hin Yung have contributed to the country in their own ways. By educating the youth, popularizing sports, or setting up businesses that have been providing employment to Filipinos, and by their talents enrich the tapestry of talent and skill for the Filipino in terms of business, in terms of culture, in terms of education. They have shown that they want and desire to be Filipino citizens. In view of all this representation unconditionally seeks the support of the members of this chamber in the approval of the foregoing measures without amendment. In doing so, we are recognizing the important roles, as I already stated, that Bruce McTavish, Father Julian Mazara, Mylene Ting, and Carlos Kwok Hin Yung have played and will play in the progress and development of our nation. And when they have more children, they will become better citizens, better armed, with good parents, good skills, and certainly the right love of country. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Are you going to give us sponsorship space? Okay. May we recognize the minority floor leader as well?
Minority leaders recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand to join the good sponsor, Senator Richard Gordon, in recommending to the Chamber the immediate approval of the committee reports on the floor, which grants citizenship to the three gentlemen and one lady who certainly deserves the grant of Philippine citizenship to them. I do not know them personally except for one, but from the records it is very clear that they deserve the favorable action of this chamber. I think I know the father of Mylen Ting. Is Elon Ting your father? Okay, so I'm sorry to reveal my age, but I knew the father quite well. A very successful and a very decent businessman who I used to service as a lawyer in the 1970s, Mr. President. That's how long ago it was. And Father Julian Mazana is an Augustinian priest. One of the best educational institutions in my hometown, Iloilo, is the University of San Agustin.
Yes.
And that's one major reason. The other reason is that I was instructed by my wife to support but regardless of that instruction, I would have I support the citizenship. And also Bruce Donald McTavish, who I have known in the sporting circles. I have heard of his name, and he has given honor to the boxing sports. I have witnessed him act as a referee in many boxing bouts, and he has done so to the credit of his profession, a very professional referee. And finally, a good friend, an old friend, Mr. King Carlos Yong. I have known this gentleman for years, and in fact, I am surprised that it is only now that we are given this privilege to grant him Philippine citizenship. I know that the wife has nothing to do with it. He nods his head, Mr. President. And it is therefore with great honor that we support the report, the committee report, and the motion of the good gentleman, the chairman of the Committee on Justice, to grant Philippine citizenship to these four outstanding human beings. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr.
President, I would like to recognize Senator Sonny Angara as well.
Senator Angara.
Mr. President, I second the motion of Senator Drilon, knowing that we are bending a rule somewhat, which is that we do not pass a bill on the day that it is sponsored, no? But I think in this case we can make that exception because we have to recognize outstanding citizens or individuals who have made a contribution to our country. And I also don't know them, except for Father Julian, who is the tennis partner of my son, Mr. President. But I support also the other individuals, having heard their sterling credentials from the speech of Senator Gordon. Mr. President, thank you.
Mr. President, may I be allowed as well to sponsor my co-sponsorship speech on two individuals? Allowed, with the permission of the body, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I have the honor to co-sponsor Committee Report number 478, granting Philippine citizenship to Mr. Carlos Kwok King Yung. Through a national of Hong Kong, Mr. Yung has, for over 40 years, worked and lived as he was a Filipino. He first came to the Philippines in 1978, fell in love, and married a Cebuana. He has since made Cebu his second home, where he established himself as a very successful entrepreneur. While his business ventures have created employment opportunities for thousands of Filipinos, it is in the area of philanthropy that Mr. Yong excels and has touched tens of thousands of lives in Cebu, together with his wife, Tita Mariquita. He has provided funding support for construction of health centers, conduct of medical, surgical, dental missions in depressed areas of Cebu Province. He has a medical assistance program for indigent patients, repair and reconstruction of public schools, and so much more that it may take me 10 minutes just to read all of this, Mr. President. But I would like to make special mention on his Operation Smile program, which he's very proud of, where he helps children with cleft lip and cleft palate problems. And it's now in its 17th year. It has given over 5,000 children new smiles with a new shot at life. With the above aforementioned contributions, I'm honored to co-sponsor this measure granting Filipino citizenship to Mr. Carlos Yung. And Mr. President, I have the honor also to co-sponsor Committee Report number 481, granting Philippine citizenship to Father Julian C. Mazana. Father Mazana, as earlier mentioned by our dear sponsor, was born in Spain in 1961, and he was ordained as a Catholic priest in the Order of St. Augustine in 1990. Mr. President, he's now contributing his time as the treasurer, was the treasurer, vice rector, OSA, vicarial treasurer, and counselor. And he also spends most of his time in the helping renovate San Agustin Church in Intramuros and construction of the Colegio San Agustin in Bulacan. For more than 2 decades, he has lived in our beloved country, and Father Manzana has molded and influenced thousands of our Filipino youth and touched many more in the communities that he has helped throughout the years. He has exhibited the same kind of love and sincere devotion one can expect from us, one of our own. It is with great pride that I stand before this chamber today to support our beloved Father Mazana, who, I am proud to say, comes from my alma mater of Colegio San Agustin. I am an Agustinian, Mr. President. I'm very proud to be an Agustinian. And just to remind the good sponsor that his law partner, Inky Reyes, is also an Agustinian. So therefore, he is in good company. With that, Mr. President, it brings me great joy to be able to co-sponsor this measure granting Filipino citizenship to one of the most valued members of our Agustinian community and of our community. And for the other two, Mr. President, Mr. McTavish, I've known him since I was a young boy watching boxing matches that he would officiate. And I thought that we had gotten foreign referees. I thought they hired a foreign referee from abroad to come here to officiate. I only realized when he applied for his citizenship that he's been living here for several decades, almost 55 decades, rather, Mr. President. And for Ms. Ting, we congratulate her as well. We need good citizens, future citizens like her, who's top of her class and well-knowledged in many fields. And so with that, Mr. President, we ask our colleagues to support the said measure. So thank you, Mr. President. Senator JV would like to also co-sponsor the said measure, Mr. President. So with that, Mr. President, would you like to say something? Yeah, good.
I'd just like to, this representation would like to just co-sponsor the 4 individuals. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Senator Dulon asked me a question, but I think he'd like to just put it on record.
Will the gentleman, Majority Leader, yield to just one question?
Yes, Mr. President, absolutely.
I heard him in his sponsorship speech that he is a proud Agustinian. I want to know, Mr. President, if the Agustinians are also proud of our Majority Leader.
I would like to ask Father Manzana. Is it a nod? Yes?
Answer might affect his citizenship.
Thank you very much.
That's what you call answer in under duress. Thank you, Mr. President.
I hope you're proud of me, Mr. President. When I all my actions here in the Senate and in my public service career, I always put in my mind what my Agustinian brothers and sisters would think about me if I do this action or this take this position. But and that's why, Mr. President, I know this hall is full of Lasalistas. LaSalle, from the presiding officer, is from LaSalle. The sponsor is from Ateneo.
And UP.
In my younger years, whenever LaSalle and Ateneo would always fight, us Agustinians would always be in the middle saying, what's all the big fuss? because we're friends with everybody. That's what happens when you're in a co-ed school. When you're in an all-male school, you start becoming aggressive. I think that's the same problem with the Xavierians. The two Xavierians that are here with us now. So with that, Mr. President, I just want to make sure that the good sponsor heard what I said earlier, that while he was on the phone, that his law partner, Attorney Inky Reyes, is also an Agustinian.
Yes,
That's correct.
not all of us can be perfect.
Okay, Mr. President, I will not answer that anymore. Mr. President, I move to close the period of interpellation. I so move. Sponsorship, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
No other member wish to interpolate the measure. I move to close the period of interpellation, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
There being no amendments, Mr. President, we move to close the period of amendments.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to approve on second reading, one by one. Let me get the numbers, Mr. President, so I don't make a mistake. House Bill number 7387, rather. House Bill number 7388, House Bill number 7179, and House Bill number 7180. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Congratulations are in order to them. Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of the same measures.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
May we ask for a 1-minute suspension, Mr.
Session is
President?
suspended for a
I can
Senate
approach
minute.
them.
Migs, after this. One last. Pagod na. Pero umaga pa ako eh.
The ambassador. So, pabigyan na natin si Tutulik. Who is on the road today? Kanina pa yan. Punta na kayo?
Session is resumed.
Great to resume. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we, with the permission of the body, I move that we consider proposed Senate Resolution number 905. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, would like to ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
Secretary is directed.
PS Resolution number 905 entitled Resolution Recognizing the Efforts of the President of the Republic of Korea, Moon Jae-in, in the efforts to bring reconciliation and development not only in the Korean Peninsula but also in the Philippines.
Mr. President, the measures in the period of sponsorship would like to recognize Senator Richard Dick Gordon to deliver his sponsorship speech.
Yes, before we recognize the sponsor of the measure, Chair first would like to recognize the Minority Leader.
Yes, I would just like to place of record the instructions of the Majority Leader insofar as this is concerned. For the record, Mr. President, the Majority Leader instructed us that if at 6:39, it's now 6:37, if at 6:39 the sponsor is still speaking, he has authorized, the Majority Leader has authorized me to question the quorum, Mr. President. Yes, for the record.
Mr. President,
The remarks of the Minority Leader are well taken.
yes, Mr. President, I'd just like to put on record, I had no such conversation with the gentleman man at all. But what he means is that maybe we can keep the speech short. Is that what I think?
I will just submit the, I will just submit the speech, lest we forget that.
No, Mr. President, Senator Gordon, of course, is recognized.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your kind remarks, Senate President Drilon, Minority Floor Leader. The Philippines has in several occasions recognized both international and national leaders and organizations that have brought development through reconciliation and friendship. And President Moon Jae-in of the Republic of Korea, South Korea, is one of those leaders. Thus, Mr. President, I'm honored to sponsor today Senate Resolution number 905 entitled Resolution Recognizing the Efforts of the President of the Republic of Korea, Moon Jae-in, in the efforts to bring reconciliation and development not only in the Korean Peninsula but also in the Philippines. A step towards peace, President Moon Jae-in has attended 3 sessions of the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit Pyongyang to meet with Chairman Kim Jong-un of the Democratic Party's People's Republic of Korea, North Korea, for the improvement of the inter-Korean relationship, the acceleration of North Korea-U.S. dialogue on the nuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and the easing of military tension between the South and the North. The declaration includes practical steps aimed at boosting inter-Korean exchanges and cooperation covering infrastructure, tourism, healthcare, reunions of Korean War, among others. The parties have also agreed to adopt a set of concrete measures to denuclearize the peninsula, with Pyongyang vowing to shut down its missile engine testing facility and missile launch pad, with experts from allied countries participating in the process, with the permanent closing of its nuclear facilities in Yongbyon in line with corresponding U.S. action. I am happy to say, Mr. President, that the Republic of Korea has extended this friendship to the Philippines. The Philippine-Korean relations started on 3 March 1949 when the Philippines became the 5th country to recognize the Republic of Korea, which was inaugurated on 15 August 1948. The friendship between the two nations they have a clue on what North Korea looks like, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Korea has always consistently and wholeheartedly acknowledged the role of the Philippines in the Korean War. They are always proud of the fact that the Philippines was among the first nations to respond to the struggle for democracy by what is today the South Korea. And if you go to their exhibition hall, I cannot remember the building, but an exhibition hall of the history of Korea has prominently included these valiant Filipino soldiers who went to Korea to fight side by side with the South Koreans in the North Korean War. And it is therefore in this light that I think we should pass this resolution, resolution number 905, without any further delay, because this is the first time I think that we are acknowledging the contribution of Korea, and I congratulate Senator Gordon for taking effort to recognize South Korea and its help. On a personal plane, as the good gentleman, Senator Gordon mentioned, my province has been a beneficiary of the assistance that South Korea has given to the Filipino people. For the record, Mr. President, next month we are going to start the actual construction of an 11.2 billion dam in Iloilo, and this is funded in substantial part with a $208 million loan that we secured from the Korean Exim Bank about 6 years ago. $208 million was lent to the country with an interest rate of 1/15 of 1%.
Wow.
1/15 of 1% with a 10-year grace period and 30 years to pay. This is much more liberal than any other loan that we are made aware of in the recent past. And most importantly, this is the single biggest official development assistance of South Korea for a single project anywhere in the whole world, for a single project that they have funded. But of course, apart from this, Mr. President, apart from those mentioned already by the good sponsor, the help of South Korea in agriculture, the rice mills mentioned by the good gentleman is spread all over the country. Rice mills have been constructed by the COICA and has helped our farmers in the provinces, in addition to the district hospitals that they have assisted, especially during the Typhoon Haiyan. So for all of these reasons, Mr. President, I think I think it is but proper that this chamber, through Resolution 305, proposed Resolution 305, would recognize the contribution of South Korea in terms of our bilateral and trade relationship and actual assistance, particularly in the area of agriculture. So it is in that sense, Mr. President, that we hope that Senator Gordon will accept our proposal that this representation be made a co-author of this measure, and that the appropriate amendment be crafted by the Secretariat to include the matters that this representation has incorporated or has mentioned in the course of this cause for representation. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Mr. President, it is gratefully accepted, and I consider it a privilege, especially since I believe Senate President Drilon is also the Korean-Philippine Parliamentary Friendship President, if I'm not mistaken. I can stand corrected. And I think that our Senate Minority Floor Leader has been honored in Japan, and now it's just acts like this that we stop being insular and start looking at other countries like Korea, even China, but also engaging China in a very, very firm and proper manner. But it is a privilege to have the Senate President and a former Senate President and Minority Floor Leader conduct all this, including Senate President Rector and acting Senate President Rector right now, President Pro Tempore. I also would like, subject to style, that we improve the resolution further, the primary purpose of which is to extol the efforts made by the South Koreans through their president to create peace in the peninsula, and that this should be encouraged, and that the Philippines is four square, like in the Korean War, in full support of the South Korean people in their quest for peace, subject to those words, and especially with the support that has enriched the proposal on how Korea has contributed immensely to Philippine development.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to add as well, to confirm the position of both Senator Gordon and our distinguished Minority Floor Leader, Senator Drilon. I had the opportunity, the great opportunity, to visit South Korea in an official mission of the Senate with the distinguished father of the distinguished son, Senator Sonny Angara. I was with Senator Ed Angara twice in Korea. We had very fond memories. We met with Koika, Exim Bank, different ministers of the Korean cabinet, and they were very proud of exactly what the good Minority Floor Leader said, very proud of our participation in their, I would say, during the the war during Korean Peninsula, and they would say the dark moments of their history. And we were there. We stood side by side with them, Mr. President. So much so, a bit of trivia, Mr. President. When we were there, they toured us to, believe it or not, a Colosseum, which is a replica of the Araneta Colosseum. It was our engineers in the city. Of course, it's minuscule now to all the brand new Colosseums, but this was built in the 1960s by Filipino engineers. We had gone there to build, those who built the Araneta Colosseum went to Korea in the 1960s as well to build the same structure in Seoul, Korea. And imagine at that time how powerful we were as a nation in the 1960s to be able to bring our technology. At that time, it was high technology, building such a large Colosseum.
We were
to
providing
Korea.
aid
We were providing aid
to Korea.
right after their war. And so now they're paying back, and several projects all over Mindanao, Visayas, and Luzon are funded by Koika and Exim Bank, such as the dam and irrigation facility that will be built in Iloilo through the efforts of our dear Minority Floor Leader. So with that, Mr. President, I would like to ask the permission of the sponsor, if we, gentlemen and ladies on the floor, with the permission of those that are present, be made co-sponsors of this measure as well. Is it all right?
Yeah. Yes, of course.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to do just a quick fact check on the name, because on the picture that was presented on the screen, pointed out by Senator Risa Ontiveros, President Moon Jae-in, it's spelled with an I-N, or is it with a U-N? Just to be sure, Mr. President.
I-N, it's I-N.
Yeah, so we'd like to make a quick, just styling amendments just to correct the typo error.
That's precisely why, Mr. President, I want a styling, subject to style, fix up all these things and come out with a very, very good resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. We enjoined the sponsor praising as well the President. You know, Mr. President, just really quickly, 2 months ago, we thought, or 3 months ago, we thought we were in the brink of war. The peninsula was in the brink of war between North Korea and the United States. Through the efforts of the President of South Korea, President Moon Jae-in, we have just stepped several or we took several steps backwards from war. And it's encouraging to see these two countries joining hands. And the talk now is how they can unify each other. We have clearly demilitarized, or we brought down the tension incredibly from 2 quarters ago or several months ago. So we support this said resolution, Mr. President. Nobody else had registered to interpolate the measure, and we move to adopt proposed Senate Resolution 905, subject to style. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
And the Senate unanimously.
Unanimously, we'd like to, with the permission of the body, have all the members of the Senate be made co-sponsor.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion's approved.
With that, Mr. President, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock.
Just one manifestation.
I-
Just one manifestation,
Withdraw
Mr.
my
President. The SSS people are here, and they've been here for almost a couple of months already, and learning from us and working with us. I just want to make my manifestation after having consulted with Senator Recto, of course. Mr. President, in due time, I will propose an amendment by substitution to Senate Bill number 1753, a written copy of which will be submitted to the Senate Secretary for reproduction and distribution to all the members in accordance with Section 82, Paragraph 2, Rule 29 of the Rules of the Senate. For the information of my colleagues, my proposed amendment by substitution will include all the concerns, the significant contributions made by the senators, particularly Senator Dillon and Senator Recto during the period of interpellations, and whatever introductions, additional discussions Senator Recto which has with the SSS. Mr. President, the same proposed amendment by substitution will also reflect all provisions of the present SS law which were not amended. The aim of the inclusion of several unamended provisions is to present the bill in its complete form for a better understanding. Mr. President, if ever there will be changes to these unamended provisions, these are limited only to mere renumbering thereof, Mr. President. In the meantime, we will ask the Majority Leader to move to suspend consideration of SB 1753 until the amendment by substitution is submitted.
We'll do it tomorrow.
Huh?
Yeah, what we can do, Mr. President,
To
is
close
that
the
tomorrow-
interpellations, to close the interpellations.
I have to seek for its consideration first, Mr. President. What we can do, Mr. President, since it will be,
Yes, just one manifestation. Subject to further individual amendments.
Yes, of course.
Yes, thank you.
yes.
Major-
Mr. President, what we
Majority
can do tomorrow, with the indulgence of the good colleague of ours, is that tomorrow I'll take it up as priority, first item on the agenda. We will reconsider, we'll make a motion tomorrow to reconsider, to consider rather, the measure, or to resume consideration of the measure. And then we will adopt his substitute bill.
And in the meantime,
Yes,
we
Mr.
are
President.
closing the period of interpolation.
Yes, tomorrow, we can do that tomorrow, sir. Because then yes. May I ask for 1 minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
I'll just bring you a manifestation anyway. And I think by Monday, it will all be sorted out with Senator Recto also.
We can close the period of interpolation.
Yeah. We close the period of interpellation today.
We can close it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sige.
That is precisely the manifestation.
Okay, Mr. President. Mr. President, with that,
Session is resumed.
thank you, Mr. President. Hanapin ko lang yung Senate Bill number. Yes.
It is
Mr. President,
1753.
I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1753. I
Is
so
there any
move.
objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, there being no other members who wish to interpolate the measure, I move that we close the period of interpellation. I so
Is
move.
there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
And I believe tomorrow the sponsor will be submitting the substitute bill. Therefore, we'd like to suspend consideration of the measure till tomorrow.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to our colleagues.
Thank you. With that, Mr. President, I go back to my previous motion. I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, Wednesday, September 26,
Session is adjourned.
2018, rather. 2016. Yes.